Should Fury retire? Uncle Frank is terrified. Sorry, bit of a football mood. Ayman loves it, as you can see. Danny Flexen here, Ayman Khan, Seconds Out live. Here to talk about Tyson Fury and whether it's time for the Gypsy King to hit the road, to abdicate the throne, if you like. Ayman, how you doing? I know you love the intro.
That was nothing short of the worst intro going for Seconds Out Live. And also the best, I guess it is as well. It was the sound of Danny Flexen singing. I know Tyson Fury is a decent singer. I can also hear the sounds of people in the chat giving their opinion already. We'll be sounding off as well to your comments in the chat too. Can't wait to talk about the big topics. I know that George Groves suggested this, that maybe Tyson Fury might retire, and people have been talking about this in the industry. We'll be chopping it all up within the next hour. Can't wait for it.
Yeah, we'll get into your comments shortly, but please do give us the thumbs up, as Thunder Road will remind you, no doubt, shortly, if he's there. I haven't seen him in the chat yet, but I'm sure he is. Never misses an episode. And also subscribe if you haven't already. Our subscriber numbers are at an all-time high at the moment. Which is obviously a good thing, but we always want more. We're greedy, so please do subscribe. Yeah, hit that button. I'm assuming that's what Ames is doing there. But yeah, Tyson Fury, should he retire? Joking football chants aside. George Groves suggested it, and what we put in the headline and the teaser on social media was that after struggling to defeat a guy in his first professional boxing match, albeit a very skilled combat artist, in Francis Ngannou, and then seeing the pay-per-view numbers, which have been reported, they haven't been confirmed, as they rarely are, but it's looking like, 11,500 pay-per-view buyers in the US, and something like just over 60,000 watching the stream on ESPN Plus, which has got to be incredibly disappointing for everyone involved. Ayman, how surprised were you by this?
I sort of was, but then sort of kind of listening to people within the US side of the industry when it comes to pay-per-views which land around 3 p.m. in the US, where people don't really care for watching sports other than the NFL or whatever it is they like over. I know it's not boxing or combat sports, even if it's MMA, even the leading MMA pay-per-views don't do too well at that sort of time. It kind of gives context as to why the pay-per-views numbers didn't land as much as we probably thought of beforehand. I'm interested to be hearing what the pay-per-view numbers are for the UK pay-per-view sales. If we can get those from Frank in the future, if they're released, that's a better indication of what really kind of went down. But truly, if we're being honest about this was never about pay-per-view sales, really. This is about launching off their Riyadh season, launching off it with a big bang. You got that big bang there with Fury and Ngannou. Is a shame it didn't really kind of land over there in the US, where Fury has been present in the US in terms of fights in the last few years.
Surely to make a big deal of Riyadh season, and obviously there's the elements of sports washing, if all that's going to be successful, isn't it the more eyes, the better? The more people that are aware of it, the better.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely. But there was only so much they could do with the fact that they had to put this out at their prime time over in Saudi and then cater to whatever market. Luckily, it was good for us because we were over here at like 9 p.m., 10 p.m., whatever it was, good prime time for us. But the US, they had to kind of give up that market in that sort of sense because of what they had to do over their side of the pond. So that's kind of the detriment of it all. So that's where those figures come through, as well as we'll give Dave Meltzer some shine. I'm not too sure about Dave Meltzer's figures. I'm not saying he's wrong, but for me, if I'm looking for a source, I'll be looking to double down and get my figures doubly tight, sure, with another source to know that they're correct. Because Dave can sometimes, with respect to Dave, be a little bit spotty.
Yeah, I mean, do you remember when Cop was reporting loads of stuff before anyone else knew about it, including figures, but they were always about one particular promoter, and people started asking questions. I'm not saying Dave's, doing anything nefarious here, but yeah, I think you're right to kind of take a wait and see approach on that. Thunder Road is here. I saw a quick message in the chat just now where he said, Liverpool draw at Kenilworth Road and Danny's in a football mood. Ayman and I were talking about the match actually just before we came live. So all I've got to say to that is Libertador para Papa, unless he's already been released, of course. I haven't been keeping up to date today. But our thoughts are with Luis Diaz and his family. But yeah, let's get into some of your comments. They're flying through actually, so I might need to scroll up a bit just so people don't get lost. 50 Cent, I'd love it if it was the real one, but he's got a boxing boxing relationship, hasn't he? He says, but to me, Fury is boring compared to Tank and Bud. Maybe it is 50 Cent. Now I've read the content of the comment. Even Shakur is better to me. That's definitely 50 Cent. The reality filter says Floyd spent his entire career ducking and cherry picking to get to 50-0. There's Thunder Road's comment about the football. Who else? Michael says you can't moan at him and ask him to stay. He's the only fighter who gets ripped and mocked for winning. Not sure who he's talking about there. I haven't followed the thread. Thunder Road, Danny got a nice trim. He'll surely be in the club this week. Beautiful. Never gets old, like me. Tommy Fumble sells more tickets, says the reality filter. North London, USA MMA fans expected to buy the fight. It was their UFC star doing an exhibition event. Yes, it's interesting how much the time difference may have an impact, as Ames was alluding to, and also how big a crossover star is Francis Ngannou, because I think Ayman was making the point in the build-up to this show, so maybe 2 weeks ago on this podcast, that it was down to Fury. He was the one doing all the selling, and Ngannou was expected to be the foil. So I'm not sure how much they were expecting from Ngannou. The reality filter says Usyk felt sorry for him. I think Usyk probably felt sorry for himself, where he saw the, multi-million-pound undisputed fight potentially going by the wayside. Dennis Baktov, again, I'd love it to be the real one, says, can Eddie Hearn say Fury should retire after almost losing to Francis and then try to get the AJ fight? If Fury should retire for scraping through Francis, what does it prove if AJ smashed through him? I think Eddie, in this case, unashamedly, is looking at the dollar signs or the pound signs, if you like, and thinking, AJ will run right through Ngannou, and when he does, it's a minimum risk fight for maximum reward money-wise, and then people won't be going on and on at AJ to fight Deontay Wilder for a bit. North London, Eddie, there we go. Eddie ignoring Wilder again. He wants Francis versus AJ, kind of what I just said. SW Boxing, Steve Wellings is here. Yes, lads, UK branch of the LDBC checking in. We love the LDBC. If you don't know what it is, Google it. I think I had to search it on Twitter when I first found out a couple of years ago now, but I'm old. What's your excuse? The reality filter, Wilder's never beaten a top 15 guy. WBC is a joke. Adam Hurley, Fury should retire before he gets caught running for Zhilei Zhang. Listen, I like Zhilei Zhang. I think he's a really good heavyweight, but I'm not sure he's going to catch anyone in a running race. Right, WM Boxing Views, we thank you for our super chat. This is becoming a bit of a habit. Now, we try and read as many of your comments as we can, but if you want to absolutely guarantee that your comment gets read out, please do donate some of that hard-earned dough and give us a super chat. WM Boxing News says, Fury should not rob us of seeing him get absolutely schooled and potentially even stopped. It would be better than Christmas. Wow. Maybe he'll do it at Christmas. No, I think he's already said he's not fighting until next year, hasn't he? But I do love Christmas, actually. A bit of an aside. I won't go into too much detail, but I'm a big, big fan of Christmas. You wouldn't think it. I'm more of a Scrooge character, but I do like Christmas. Matthew Leach says, Fury is by far the best heavyweight when he's fit and focused. We need to see him put AJ to sleep and knock out Usyk to cement his legacy. Jack Dutton, whether the Ngannou fight was evidence of a Fury decline or not, and we still don't know that, Fury needs to take the Usyk fight regardless. It's an era-defining fight. Yeah, but would you want your legacy to be defined by a loss, particularly against someone you've mocked for their small stature in the past? That's the big question, isn't it? S. Clayton, hopefully Simon Clayton. The irony, last week Fury shouting Joshua is done. Now the poor lifestyle choices have caught up with Frank's son and Danny's bro. If that was my actual bro, you might have a point. I hope he's not watching. Who else have we got? So last one before we move on. Jeffrey Riberich says Derek Lewis should fight Fury and Tai Tuivasa. Yeah, maybe. Tuivasa versus Fury would be entertaining for the fans. That's another crossover fight we can consider, I suppose. We'll come back to some more of your comments in due course. But I guess the question I want to put to you, Ayman, is if we're not saying he should retire because of the comparatively poor performance on pay-per-view, how much of Fury's performance against Ngannou, and we covered this a little bit last week, is down to him not taking him seriously, maybe not having a great camp, etc., adjusting to someone who's very awkward, which I know has been mentioned by a couple of trainers who've talked about the Fury fight. And how much of it do we think, because we don't know for sure, is down to some sort of irreparable slide, as I know Shane McGuigan was one of the many who suggested.
I caught a little bit of a clip of something. It was from BBTV, British Boxers TV. I'll give a little bit of credit to them. A little clip. It was interesting from Shane Fury. So his brother Shane, who's been in camps with Tyson, and there was a little clip of Shane saying, Tyson is the worst champion you can get. Not in the sense of being a champion, but in the sense of being someone who defends their belts and keeps their level high. He's a great getter. He's a great chaser. If you're using wrestling terms, he's a great chaser of the belts. But when you love that chase, you want that chase, and then getting it and keeping it, defending it, that's a bit of an issue. Keeping those levels high, that's a bit of an issue. Against someone who you maybe are expected to beat, that's a bit of an issue. Like we've seen with Wallin, like we've seen in other performances, that's a bit of an issue. Is that real kind of cliche phrase of, fighting to a level of an opponent? I know that he's kind of said, look, we did a 12-week training camp and we took our opponent seriously, but the truth of the matter is that might have been done physically, but what about up here? Do we know that? Can we understand that? When everyone's telling you, oh, this should be easy, when the media, when we're kind of writing people off and saying, is this the guy that you should be fighting right now? Does that slip into your mind? Or is it the potential of right now that he is a little bit on the decline, as some trainers are mentioning? He maybe should retire, as George Groves is potentially saying. Let's take that little bit argument for a second quickly here. If we're saying he should retire and putting it out there, why would you not retire? Considering the fact that you've got 150 million in the bank, you've got all your faculties, you're now a bona fide star with a Netflix series, have been on ITV with your series, have highlight reels upon highlight reels of moments in boxing that you've made. Why not? Why not put it out there after maybe you've done Undisputed? That's the caveat here. Maybe you can then retire from that point. Otherwise, look, you've got to kind of understand maybe a reflection of where you are. If trainers are kind of identifying that you can't do what you did before, you can't dance for 12 rounds like you used to. Frank Warren's saying that as well. He's not quite the same as he used to be able to. Then you've got to kind of reassess and refigure what you can do in a boxing ring. And Tyson did do that by bringing in Sugar Hill and looking to knock out and maybe emulating a bit more of what Klitschko did in the ring and being that type of heavyweight. But maybe that assessment has to happen again. Maybe he has to come in, reassess, look how he's going to compete as a heavyweight at this level if he's continuing to decline, as people are saying, and seeing if he can still compete. Because other fighters, they're reassessing like an anti-Joshua and adding to their bow. And they look, you know what? We have our doubts about AJ, but in terms of the in-ring action, we can poke a few holes, but it's not bad so far what we've seen from him. So if they're on the upwards trajectory and you're on the decline, that's for a time for you to get picked off and picked out by other heavyweights like an Alexander Usyk as well.
Yeah, we've got a poll up. Should Fury retire? Binary choice, yes or no. No non-binary here for our polls, at least. But yeah, Tyson Fury, should he retire or not? And I think there is a case to be made that not necessarily it's time to retire, but that his lifestyle choices, but also his inactivity and his weight gain and weight loss in quick succession at times may have started catching up to him. You know, we all looked at someone like Ricky Hatton, who put on an immense amount of weight between fights and then got back down. And obviously that's different because he was in a division that did have a set weight limit. But Fury's done it a couple of times as well, put on a stack of weight, got rid of it for, you know, because he wanted to get back in the ring or he wanted to feel better about himself. But that does have a longer term impact on the body. I can't talk from personal experience because I've always been better at putting it on than losing it. But just trust me on the fact that it will have an impact, as will the long periods on the shelf between fights. You know, his only appearance of the year was the Ngannou fight. It did turn out to be more grueling than expected. And there's obviously the lifestyle issues as well. We know Fury likes a drink or has done in the past, the eating habits, you know, the drugs in the past as well. We hope that's a thing of the past. So it wouldn't be a massive shock if his body's starting to show the wear and tear of those choices. And, you know, he's still relatively young for a heavyweight. But when you've had a number of grueling fights and you take long periods of time off between fights, if he's still in the gym throughout those off periods, then I suppose it mitigates the effects somewhat. But I understand why people are, you know, considering the fact that maybe it's time for him to call it a day. Ben's the chat's moving so fast. We read a bit of chats. I just don't know if I'll read all of them. Just let me get to the next one. But his next move is very important. He has to make a big statement. Very good point. Don King, I mean, if only, he's obviously not the real one. Says, just because he had one bad performance doesn't mean he should retire, FFS. All right, Don King, FFS. WDYM. I know what you mean. I'm just kidding. Michael says, Tyson Fury is allowed an off night. He looked bad against Otto Wallin, but it means nothing. You don't judge a fight off one fight. That's just stupid. Yeah, but it could be an indicator of something more. I don't think we're saying 100% it is, but it could be. And also, Valen's a very skillful fighter. He's now in a position to fight for the IBF championship when it gets vacated. So there's a difference, I think, between having a bad night against a Valen, who's a legitimate top 10 heavyweight boxer, and against Francis Ngannou, who's a top heavyweight MMA fighter, but was having his first proper boxing match. Jeffrey Riberich says Tyson Fury versus Brock Lesnar in a boxing match would be awesome to watch. Yeah, I don't know if Lesnar, I don't know if striking's the way to go for Lesnar as a MMA guy. Maybe in WWE we'll see it. You know, if we see Brock Lesnar and indeed Tyson Fury back. Vinny Patel says no, he should not retire. I'm no fan of this man and his antics, but to say he's done or his legs have gone is premature. It may be true, we won't know until he fights again. Very good point. Where are we going? I'm trying to get to people that we haven't had yet. Ken C says Fury's scared since Rick Allen said no, he should come back to fight Ngannou and take his loss like a man because he will lose next time. We're going to be talking about a potential Usyk fight in a minute. Where I break it 46 says one bad fight and look at all this. OOOAAA or UR if you prefer. SW Boxing, always worth listening to. I haven't actually read the comment yet. I don't believe the PPV numbers unless they're confirmed by Rick Glazer, 32 years in the sport. I think we've just been glazed, Damon. Michael, hold on. Don King goes to show you how weak the heavyweight division is when you have life and death with a guy on his debut. I mean, he is an experienced combat sports fighter, but yeah, I understand your point. Dennis Backtoff, how often should heavyweights be fighting when they become world level? I feel like they take more wear and tear both in camp and in fights. Very good point. So, Aim, let's talk about Usyk because there now seems to be an acceptance from his team that the undisputed fight is more likely to take place now in February, despite all the banter about suing each other and so on. I imagine they don't mind having a bit of extra time to prepare. They probably see Fury as a bit of a sitting duck at this stage. A bit of a, ready to be taken, ready for the taking. But yeah, what do you make of that fight now in light of the Ngannou fight? And does it change it? Do you think Usyk will now enter as the favourite?
It's quite complicated, really, because first of all, I was favouring Usyk before this Ngannou fight, not by much. But I was favouring Usyk beforehand, and I still have that opinion. The fight with Ngannou didn't really do much to really sway my favour towards Usyk any further, to be honest with you. And that's because the attributes that Francis Ngannou has aren't the attributes that Alexander Usyk has. Usyk's more on a basis of skill as opposed to that physicality. Although Usyk does wrestle very well and more so probably has the wrestling advantage over Tyson Fury when they meet in the ring next year. But he doesn't have that size advantage. He doesn't have that physicality. He doesn't have maybe those spots of experience that Tyson Fury has of being down, crashing down on the canvas and getting back up there in the ring. That it kind of like it's apples and oranges in terms of the two fighters completely. And I think as well, there's a lot more, like we mentioned last weekend, there's a lot more tape on Alexander Usyk and his capabilities than there is on Francis Ngannou in the boxing ring, and that element of surprise has now gone. A rematch, I imagine, would I think, for boxing's sake, reflect differently should the two ever meet in the ring, and that's kind of what sticks in my mind really in terms of how I look at a potential Usyk fight. I do feel that Usyk does have the better skills of Fury and probably retains more of his peak than Fury is showing to do right now. But the fact that he has that reach advantage, the fact that he has that height advantage, we see both of these in face-offs pre-fight, and they look quite similar in size. But I'm sure Alexander Usyk is wearing some elevated boots, and I'm sure Tyson Fury is wearing some flats, and that will be more evident in the ring as well. And then for me, I still hold the fact that I know we saw this fight, and it was a bit of a shock, and I interviewed Michael Hunter, that's coming out at 6 p.m. and he kind of said, we kind of joked and laughed and said that was a bit of a Curtis Stevens, Gennady Golovkin moment where Tyson Fury didn't know what to do and was really shocked by what Francis Ngannou's output was. I don't think there will be any shocks or I don't think there'll be any surprises that Fury hasn't preempted or that hasn't prepared for in a fight with Usyk. So I don't feel really that my kind of eye on that fight has changed, but I wonder how the people think in the chat, if they've changed their opinion from that fight. I wonder how you feel, Danny, about the same thing, because I'm not too sold yet fully that Fury is on the decline like people are saying.
It has changed my opinion to an extent, not in terms of who wins. I'm still backing Fury, but I've got to say, I thought Fury 100% would win. I could see like a method to Usyk's victory, but I couldn't actually see it happening, whereas now I can. Now I think if Fury performs in a similar way that he did against Ngannou, he will lose. You know, Usyk's at the very top of his game, and he's an incredibly talented fighter. If Fury fights like he did against Ngannou, he'll lose. I guess I'm banking on the fact that that was an off night rather than irreparable damage. We'll see. Let me get into some of these comments, and then we're going to move on in topic. Thunder Road says, if Fury retires, he'll owe the Saudis tens of millions for breaching the Usyk contract. But we're talking about a man who's given millions and millions to charity, let's not forget. SW Boxing. Oh, no, that was a Rick Glazer comment. Hold on a sec. Tyson Fury going to get slapped to pieces, says Tesdruch RC. Probably pronounced that wrong. Michael says Usyk is going to meet his master. Usyk can't even change from southpaw. He's a one-dimensional fighter, does the same thing every fight. Yeah, but there's a case to be made, you know, jack of all trades, master of none. You know, maybe Usyk's perfected his particular skill set. So maybe Fury changes too much in terms of his stance and his style. The reality field says Usyk is way too fast, way too slick for the Gypsy Queen. CB says Fury has one off night and wins, but he gets more criticism, hate than AJ gets after multiple losses. Take issue with that. We've given AJ plenty of valid criticism, I'm not going to say hate, on this podcast over the weeks. John L. Sullivan, great to see you back from the dead. Should be Ngannou versus Dubois for the undisputed. Have you seen those memes, David? Like, I've seen a few going around saying Usyk, these are the real world heavyweight champions, like Dubois and Ngannou.
I've not seen it, no.
That's pretty cool. But yeah, I think you can make a case that Ngannou beat Fury, but I'm not sure how much of a case you can make the other way around for Usyk and Dubois. It seems more of a tenuous link. But yeah, we're gonna move on now to a linked topic. But Francis Ngannou, it seems like going into the Fury fight, everyone was writing him off, saying it was a bit of a joke, saying he had no chance. And now, after a great performance, let's not beat around the bush. He did very well, exceeded most people's expectations. Everyone seems to be calling him out. Everyone wants Ngannou now, including Anthony Joshua. Zhilei Zhang was rumoured briefly, but then Frank Warren said he's injured when he was speaking to our colleague Radio Raheem last week. Joseph Parker seems to be right in the frame. And even Derek War Chisora, who I think will fight anyone for the right amount of money. And that might actually be quite a competitive fight. Ayman, what do you make of it? Who would you like to see Ngannou fight next?
Yeah, let's get this out of the way. I know it's been said 1,000 times, but it does bear reiteration that it's great to see Francis Ngannou with the story that he's had, with the background that he's come from, the real unlikeliest of success stories, now being that success, having obviously had UFC success, but getting that payday success. Now it's great. Payday. He wants payday. Other fighters want payday. I hope he kind of makes a meme of himself as well in that sense, and imitates Canelo's line at the next press conference. But no, I'm not surprised that people want the opportunity of Francis Ngannou, because they'll look at him and say, you know what? Now I've got a bit of tape on him. I can do something here. Heavyweight, it's the old cliche. It only takes one punch. I've got that punch. I'm the one that can dethrone Francis Ngannou from his pedestal right now. And we've seen that Anthony Joshua hasn't quite put his step forward yet, has he? It's Eddie Hearn pushing him forward there. And again, I think Eddie wants to position his fighter, because there seems to be right now, if you believe Tyson Fury's word, frozen out of the Saudi situation, having dealt with the Saudis beforehand with the change in the guard from the skill set challenge, I believe it was, to the GEA. Hearn finds himself in an unfavorable position, maybe wants to find himself in a better one by putting AJ forward. But the likes of Joseph Parker and the likes of Derek Chisora have been mentioned. Derek Chisora has explicitly mentioned himself. And I'm of the belief that originally, when Francis Ngannou was mooted about having a fight in boxing, it was Derek Chisora as the lead candidate, the lead name, that was put forward to fight Francis as his entrance into boxing, as his fight to see if Francis could make it in boxing. They obviously went with Tyson Fury, a bigger occasion, a bigger mark now. They can now do that Derek Chisora fight. I spoke with Don Charles, former trainer of Derek Chisora and good friend still of Derek Chisora, and he said, look, if Derek Chisora fights Francis Ngannou, he'll come to brawl. He won't be afraid to punch. He won't be afraid to throw. He'll go and throw with Francis Ngannou. That makes for a thrilling fight, but boxing fans, we don't really want to see Derek Chisora in the ring again. Joseph Parker may present a better challenge as well. Joseph Parker looking for opportunities, took his opportunity and taking it over Simon Keane, looked overmatched in that fight. But Parker on the rebuild since his fight with Joe Joyce. Could he be the one to fight Francis Ngannou? Combinations of plenty in that fight. Again, a fight that I know Joseph Parker isn't sometimes, at least in recent years, despite the Joyce fight, been one to really kind of pull the names out and pull the excitement up. But I think that's still an exciting fight for Joe and Francis to throw down to in Saudi. So there's definite options there. I don't blame any fighter wanting to be the B-side there for that fight. But I hope, well, the thing is, though, as well, you don't want to kill the cash cow here, too, because Francis Ngannou's up here. You kind of want to match him with someone who it's going to be a competitive fight, like with Tyson Fury, but maybe they won't quite get the win, so we can keep the Ngannou train rolling, so we can keep calling for a rematch. I think that's the big play here. He's got to be matched right. He's got to be matched correctly, despite the heavyweights wanting him, the experienced heavyweights. I know Fury underperformed, but these other experienced heavyweights won't leave themselves shocked or surprised come the end of the final bell. So difficult situation here.
Yeah, in some ways it's like the Jake Paul situation, albeit at a lower level. You've got someone who's not used to professional boxing. He's, new to the sport, albeit without the combat background Ngannou's got. And it's knowing where to match him. So you keep kind of gradually, incrementally increasing the quality of the opposition, but you can't do it too far because then you ruin the big money fight. Now, for Jake Paul, the big money fight, or at least the first one, was Tommy Fury, and he got through that, and he gave a good enough account of himself, as Ngannou did against Fury, that he can get another big money fight. He can translate it. And for Jake Paul, that will probably be against KSI, ultimately. And for Ngannou, who knows? Maybe it will be that Fury rematch. But it's a tougher task to match Ngannou appropriately so he doesn't lose in the meantime, because anyone at this level, an elite heavyweight, they could all bang and they could all land a shot on someone who hasn't got the best boxing defense so far. And they won't underestimate him, as Fury may or may not have, because he's now a known quantity. So it's a very risky strategy for Ngannou, who's already made loads of money, let's be honest, and he's already a hero to millions of people. So, maybe it won't matter so much. But if he really wants to spin this off into, a big a boxing cash pot, if you like, they do need to be very careful. I'd be sticking him in with as many kind of, you don't really get non-punchers at heavyweight, but as many light punchers as possible. I just want to say, Andy White, big supporter of our channel, often featured on our podcast previously that we had in the office. He's unable to join the live chat for some reason. I'm not going to put it down to his age and not being able to work technology, although I do suspect that might play a part. But he says Fury needs to seriously consider retirement. His timing was miles off and so were his feet. Also, Ngannou ragdolled him, which, it's hard to argue with any of that. I'm just going to go to some of the chat comments now on this Ngannou topic. So let's just have a look. Fury, still talking about Fury by most people there. Tommy Fury almost got beat by a rapper, and Tyson Fury almost got beat by a wrestler. Real fighting men, ? I think the biggest problem with that comment is that you call KSI a rapper. I mean, I'm not sure I like that. But yeah, we'll move on from that as quickly as possible. Dennis Baxov says, what's Saudi's infatuation with Del Boy? Someone needs to show them the clip of him kissing his opponents on the lips. That was Carl Baker. I remember arriving to cover that fight for Boxing News the day after it had all kicked off, and saw Clifton Mitchell, who was still like stunned by the whole thing had occurred. But yeah, that aside, Saudi's infatuation with Del Boy, didn't Chisora have some role with the Saudi boxing infrastructure? He was like a Saudi rep or something for a little while. I think maybe Joe Gallagher's taken that away from him now. Maybe we'll see them clash on Ngannou's undercard, Gallagher versus Chisora. I'll make it 50-50 at this stage. The reality filter says Chisora can barely string a sentence together. To be fair, I don't know how much of that's down to boxing. No, I'm joking. Chisora's a great guy. And yeah, I think there are noticeable decline in his speech and so on. So, I think Ayman and I both agree that we wouldn't like to see him back in the ring. Certainly not in a remotely competitive fight. Where are we going? Thunder Road says 100 plus watching. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up. We appreciate you, Thunder Road, as tongue in cheek as you're extolling the various chat people to give us the thumbs up is. Hopefully, it does impact some of them. I mean, it has gone up by about 5 since your first plea. Jeffrey Riberich says Ngannou needs to fight Deontay Wilder in a boxing match in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. Is that where you live, Jeff? I'm guessing it might be. I'm not sure if that's the biggest money market for that fight. I think any fight involving Ngannou going forward will be in Saudi, in Riyadh until the end of Riyadh season, sometime in 2026. I think it actually ends in spring next year. But yeah, let's wait and see. News and booze. It says that just makes me think of what's the meme? Not the meme. The guy who's selling Prime.
Wakey Wines.
That's it. Wakey Wines. News and booze. Fury just had a bad night, but battled through and won. He did it before his eye got split open. Next fight will tell if he's done or not. Alex Duarte says the fact the heavyweight champion of the world got manhandled so easily by a boxing novice, that just waters down the excitement for Fury's next match. I disagree. I think it makes it more intriguing, the Usyk fight, if that is his next fight. Because I think a lot of people were backing Fury. Very few people were backing Usyk to win before last week's events. And now a lot more people are giving Usyk a chance or even picking him to win the undisputed fight. So I think, in a way, this could actually help. And it makes it more likely it actually happens as well, I think. The reality filter says, I still don't think Usyk-Fury fight will happen. I wish I'd have read that before I made my comment. Fury will retire or have another breakdown in inverted commas. Listen, we can't shame or make fun of mental health issues. If Fury says that's the issues he was going through, then it's not for us to say we don't believe him or that it's not true. But what I will say is losing or almost losing, Freudian slip, to Francis Ngannou could have a deleterious effect on Fury's mental health legitimately. I can't imagine that he's taken it very well. And I said last week that in interviews I've seen with him, and they haven't been many, but in interviews I've seen with him since the Ngannou fight, he has seemed somewhat of a lost or broken soul. Let's hope that's not the case. Dennis Baxter says, what was Sugar Hill doing? Shane said he only arrived 5 weeks before, but came off like Tyson didn't want him around before. Sugar should be pissed if true. I think Sugar and Emmanuel Stewart was often in this position with other fighters as well. May well be used as a scapegoat, and probably willingly in some cases because, someone's got to take the fall if you're trying to sell a big fight coming up and you've got to make excuses for Fury's poor performance. If the trainer knows he's still going to be an intrinsic part of the Fury camp, maybe he doesn't mind getting blamed for a rare off night. I'm just surmising here. I don't know for sure. Michael says, I think Fury versus Usyk is more likely to happen now. Usyk will rate his chances higher, and it was only an exhibition. I think officially it wasn't an exhibition against Ngannou, as it turned out. Ngannou certainly didn't seem to be taking it like an exhibition, and Fury didn't say anything in that kind of realm after the fight. But we shall see. I think that's all from the chat for the time being. So it might be time to move on from all things heavyweight to something that, like it or lump it, will probably be at middleweight and may yet take place abroad. Although Eddie Hearn says Eubank versus Ben 3, if we're going to go with that tagline, will not happen. I interviewed him, will not happen abroad. Sorry, really bad time to take a pause. But Eddie Hearn, I spoke to him last week via Zoom. I wasn't one of the lucky ones rubbing shoulders with the rich and famous out in Monte Carlo, but I did get to speak to him on Zoom while he was there. And he said there's no chance that Chris Eubank Jr. against Conor Benn takes place outside the United Kingdom. Even if the board do not approve Conor Benn's application for a new British boxing license, they will still go ahead with the show, most likely either in the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium or in the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff. What does this mean, Ayman? Not just for the fight itself, but for the sport? Because it seems like Eddie Hearn is saying there's a possibility that another sanctioning body could sanction a show on UK soil involving two of the most well-known professional boxers currently in the country.
Yeah, look, it's obviously a developing situation, so we won't know until we get the full news. We get drips and drabs of little bits of this case, which we've been covering across SecondsOut over however long it's gone off now, and it leaves us all in a very confused situation. The timeline of events is very kind of detailed. Well, it's detailed, but it's still, for the layperson who's sort of been following it, or even the hardcore, I find myself to be confused as to what happened when, and all the details and the whole timeline up until this point. It's very, very confusing at times, and I think that's probably the best situation for a fight going ahead, to kind of not know where things stand, so it doesn't get hurt by the original failing of the 2 tests, as it were, or the original adverse findings, however you want to put it, of the first two tests. So look, it's for myself personally, it leaves a little bit of a bad taste in the mouth, in the sense that I don't, as a fan or as an observer or someone who's paying a ticket or whatever it is, taking myself out of the situation of covering the sport, I don't fully know the situation. I don't know the full depths of whether this ex-fighter is clear or not, because it's so confusing, because it's so stated. We don't know where we stand right now. We just hear bits of information. We don't have any proof. We get talk of 300-page dossiers and that sort of thing, and it's inconclusive in terms of the evidence of a fighter being proved to be innocent of what they've been found in the first place. And that's not enough for me to kind of want to really kind of push forward and say, right, I'm happy with this event. I'm happy for this to go forward. I've been told that it's been cleared, but why has it been cleared? What is the situation? It's very difficult there. And then it kind of leaves the feeling that, well, if these things are going to happen, you leave it long enough, you say enough things, and then you can circumvent kind of needing to put yourself out there, or put yourself in the spotlight, or put the evidence forward. Instead, you can go through different routes to get a fight organized. And I imagine that'll be through other organizations, as the PBA. They might look to go that route as opposed to the British Boxing Board of Control. And I don't know. I'd like to kind of slam the brakes slightly, and I'd like to think that maybe Hearn won't go through that route, and he would, and is sincere to say that he does want it licensed by the British Boxing Board of Control. Maybe he's just trying to use the media to just push a little bit and apply a little bit of pressure there, potentially. But again, as I've said there, it's a very, very very convoluted situation, complex situation, which it's hard to kind of say where we stand right now. But the issue with me is I don't fully know the details. I don't fully know what the truth is here, because they haven't really been provided.
Yeah, and I guess one of the bigger questions is, are the board and UKAD still appealing the original independent panel decision to lift the suspension on Conor Benn? Because if they are, how can they possibly consider a new boxing license application from Conor Benn while appealing the fact that he is allowed, quote unquote, to fight at the moment in this country? It's a very muddy situation to be involved in for them. And the board have got to make a start. You either go all the way with it and say, well, we don't think he should be fighting, that's why we've appealed it, so we're going to reject any new application, and then open themselves up to any legal matters that come into place, any legal challenges from Hearn and the matchroom team, but also the incursion on what they see as their fiefdom, if you like, from the PBA, who are already sanctioning the Misfits events, of course, which I'm sure the board aren't particularly happy about. But to then sanction a bout between two proper professional boxers, one of whom has a license by the British Boxing Board of Control, it's going to be a very bitter pill for them to swallow, isn't it? So they've got a lot of decisions to make. And also, Kalle Sauerland, who's already working with Misfits, but has a British license, boxing promoter's license through Wasserman Boxing, he's got to make some tough decisions as well if this goes ahead without board backing. Because as we saw when Frank Warren put up David Hay and Derek Chisora with the Luxembourg Boxing Authority, easy for me to say, anyone who was involved in that event who were existing board license holders were threatened with recriminations at the time for their involvement. And it could be the same here. You know, Kalle Sauerland has got a deal with DAZN for Misfits and for normal fights. He's also got a deal with Channel 5. He's not going to want to risk his board license to make Eubank Ben, however much money that will generate. And that's what Hearn alluded to. He said, you know, I'll have to consider my position in the promotion if the board try and block the fight. And so will Kalle Sauerland from his side. And everyone involved, trainers, seconds, managers, everyone who's got a board license who would be involved in this, let's not deny it, it's a mega fight, will have to consider if it's worth losing their license over, if indeed that's the threats that are being implied. Now let's go to the chat and see what people are saying about that. Looks like there's quite a lot of comments, which is always a good sign. Where are we? That's news and booze, so I've gone up too far. North London says, Eubank versus Ben, the super fight in the UK, and Ben is clean now. He ain't eating weird eggs. We're all weird eggs here on SO Live. Where we go. If BBBFC don't sanction but give permission, are they liable if something goes wrong? Why would they risk it when Ben's already put health at jeopardy? That's Dennis Baktov. Well, it doesn't really work like that. They're not giving their permission if they don't sanction it. It's not up to them to give permission. The board can only control who fights under their banner. If you're talking about permission regarding the appeal, as in the suspension being lifted, that's a UCAD issue. So UCAD haven't given their permission, but they refer any appeals to an independent panel. The independent panel decided to lift the suspension. UCAD have to accept that. They're bound by it. So now UCAD can appeal and try and get him, Conor Benn, resuspended, which appears to be what they're trying to do. But in the meantime, he is free to fight, but he hasn't got a border control license. So if he fights, for example, under a PBA sanction, there's nothing the board can do to stop it, and they can't punish him for it either because he's not a license holder. Very similarly to, as I mentioned, Hey Chisora, I think it was Hey at the time, didn't have a border control license. So he was able to kind of avoid punishment for that fight because he didn't have a license at the time. And I think they'd suspended Chisora's license. Urban Production says, should Tyson Fury retire over an exhibition fight? How about we all grow up? Yeah, but we're all here talking boxing. We're all having fun. We don't want to grow up. Reese Cato, I don't know if that's a pronoun, it says, well, seconds out, boycott it then if it's against your values. We haven't said it's against our values. We've said it's a subject worth considering. I think there's a big lot of grey area in between those two viewpoints. Dennis Baksov says, appeal should stop the process, surely. If planning permission is being appealed, do they let you build anyway? But this is it. I think if the appeal is still outstanding, I don't see how the board can consider a new license application from Ben. So they might be in a kind of between a rock and a hard place. Owen says, Daniel, it feels like you've been hounding Tyson Fury all week, and Eggy Hearn is funny. Ngannou's loss is his biggest ever win. Right. I mean, I go by Danny for a start. Hounding Tyson Fury all week? Nah, definitely not. I'll go back with Fury quite a long way, and I don't think you'll find a bigger Tyson Fury fan, if that's the right word, in the media than me. But you've got to be honest. We stand for integrity here at Seconds Out, and we're considering all angles. But appreciate you watching, of course. Where are we? North London says, Eddie wanted Ben to fight again, but Eddie ignored Dillian White when he failed the UCAD test. I think with Dillian White, though, there was a history of it, wasn't there? That was like, his third adverse finding or test that was called into question. So I think there was a bit of a build-up of that. And I think, wasn't it Dillian White at the time wasn't contracted to Matchroom by the time the test came out or something like that as well? So there's probably an element of that involved. Thunder Road says, let's take a moment to savour the return of Chris Eubank Sr. to the YouTube boxing world. Harlem Eubank is on Channel 5 on Friday, and we'll call out Conor Benn and Echo Esserman afterwards. Well, he's already called out Conor Benn, as has Eubank Sr. on behalf of his nephew. They've already done that on Seconds Out and probably other channels as well. Other channels are available, but we'd rather you didn't watch them. But yeah, so he's already done that. But yeah, Harlem deserves his own moment in the sun, I believe. News and Booze, Wakey Wine says, I don't believe Ben versus Eubank is a mega fight. Both are unpopular. Ben is damaged goods. I think you'll be surprised just how big a fight it is when it eventually happens, when it inevitably happens. And then there's lots of other people naming various fighters that have failed drug tests over the years. Dennis Baksov says Dillian's third in boxing, fourth in his combat career. Yeah, I did forget the kickboxing ban as well. But yeah, so distinctly different situation between Dillian and Matchroom and Conor Benn and Matchroom, I think. Ayman, I guess just to round this off, do you see the fight going ahead between Eubank and Benn next year? And do you see it being under board of control sanction if you had to pick?
That's a real tough question, Danny. It depends on what stage the appeal process is and how much because we're so scarce on details, really, it's hard to kind of identify what what really will be the path and where we will end up. Do I think the fight does end up happening? Yes. Do I think the British Boxing Board of Control sanction it? I don't think they will. I don't think they will. I think Hearn will end up having to go a different route, and where that leaves the British Boxing Board of Control, I'm not too sure. That's kind of a we're just past Halloween, but that's not very kind of good thought to be thinking about around this time period as well. Putting that to a side for a second, and I know that's a lot to put to the side there for a moment, but in terms of this actual fight, and it was mentioned that this fight not being a big fight, but it is absolutely huge. And again, putting a lot of it to the side, and I spoke before on different channels about the health aspects. I believe Eubank Jr. doesn't have to boil down to the weight and such, and both sides as well, with Eubank, with Conor Benn jumping up weights as well too. But putting that to a side too, in terms of this being a fight, despite it took Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou to get into the ring for boxing to be back buzzing again over this side of the pond, even though we've had big fights as well, namely over the other side of the pond. But it took that to happen for boxing to be back in the buzzing and talking amongst people again. This is the type of fight that gets people talking again. This is the type of the fight where Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn are on This Morning or whatever it is, and on Channel 1 or whatever, BBC One, all that history between the two fighters gets brought back. All the lapsed fans who haven't been watching boxing for years, but they saw Chris Eubank Sr., they saw Nigel Benn in the ring, they get interest because the sons are fighting again. This is the type of fight that really, again, I'm stressing it again, putting everything to the side as a fight, as a spectacle that I think boxing does need. It needs this type of fight, this type of occasion to really kind of add fuel to the fire, to get boxing back on front pages, back at people's on people's tongues as well too. But you have to take a lot to the side to get to that point.
And Thunder Road, our good friend, has called you out, Ayman, for your Easter egg. Look at Ayman giving Prime free advertising courtesy of the reflection in his mirror.
I needed a hat. To wear. Drew a haircut.
And Kelly Marie's lumped on. Love your KSI Paul Prime hat. I mean, I hope they're going to lump up some cash to sponsor this podcast, to be fair. Got to get something out of it. Now, before we go, we've got the poll results in. Thank you to everyone who voted. It's quite a big turnout, probably more than the last general election. Should Tyson Fury retire? No wins the day with 64%. 35% say yes. So if Fury watches this or listens to what any of you guys think, I guess it will be carrying on, and we'll see him against Usyk in February. For what I've said earlier, I think is an even more intriguing fight. Really appreciate you all watching. If you're watching this on playback, please do give us a thumbs up, drop a comment. We might still respond to some of them after our live portion's finished. And subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, I will give the closing remarks to my venerable colleague, Ayman Khan.
35%. I think that's really high. I think that's very, very high off the back of that Ngannou fight. I think people are writing off Fury quite quickly, to be fair. I respect everyone's opinion in the chat, but I think that's
everyone's.
Well, I've got it. I definitely do. But look, I think that's very, very high. A little bit unfair, really, on what Tyson Fury's done so far and his history of getting up off of the canvas and rising back like a phoenix, like Roy Jones Jr. said in an interview with Brady Raheem. But make sure to keep tuned in to Seconds Out this week, because we've got much more boxing content coming your way, including covering the Newcastle show, Shabazz Masood.
And an exclusive interview from Mr. Ayman Khan of Michael Hunter in just
don't worry, it's coming.
minutes.
It's coming. Shabazz Masood headlines against San Martin, a rescheduled fight. And I'll be covering myself in Brighton in amongst the Furies and the Eubanks, covering Harlem Eubank against Timo Schwarzkopf. We've got in 10 minutes, as Danny alluded to. Wait, how long is it? 10 minutes or 9 minutes? 6 p.m., whatever it is. I spoke to Michael Hunter, a heavyweight contender, looking to get his reaction to Fury and Ngannou. Martin Bacoli as well, his reaction on that, and as well his back and forth with Deontay Wilder too. So make sure to keep tuned into Seconds Out for all that coverage. We'll see you hopefully again as well next week too. A lot of people in the chat, Danny. A lot of people buzzing about boxing right now. Can't wait to see them in the leaner weeks next week and such to be giving us their opinions as well on SO Live. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Cheers, guys.